friends, it's Loree with the blog wagonwheelhomestead.com. Welcome back to my channel. It's the very last day of March. We've got snow on the ground. I'm going to spend some time with you today working on some spring things because if you're like me, you're ready for spring. I'm going to be making some lemon blueberry sourdough bread and lemon blueberry sourdough focaccia with you. And then we're also going to be starting some seeds. So I'm just going to show you very simply how I start some of my tomato seeds and my pepper seeds. Anyway, I hope that you'll come along for this video and that you will enjoy just a few things I'm doing to make it feel a little bit more like spring around here. So to get the sourdough started, I've got 3 cups of warm water. This is going to be a double batch. We're going to make half of it into a focaccia. Focaccia is just very similar to an artisan bread. It's just what you do with it, and you can definitely let it ferment longer if you choose. So I'm just going to be pouring in my sourdough starter. I fed this last night, probably about 12 or 13 hours ago. So it's a little bit past its peak, but it's still perfectly fine for making bread. It's going to be just great. So I'm going to do 3 cups of warm water and 1 cup of sourdough and just pour that into my bowl. And then we're going to add 7 cups of flour approximately. I'm just going to mix it up. It's better to err on the side of a little bit less flour when you're making sourdough without a scale. You can always add in a little bit more, but you know, sourdough is a fairly wet dough. This is similar to my artisan loaves of bread, only we're gonna do some fun things with lemon, blueberries, and cream cheese. So this is gonna be a really super delicious springtime treat. So I'm just gonna mix this up, and if I find that it's a little too dry, you can add just a little bit more water. Again, you want to have a pretty wet, shaggy dough. And I'm just gonna do a few stretch and folds on this throughout the morning as we do some school. This afternoon, we'll let it bulk ferment and cold ferment, and then we'll bake it this evening. So this is often how I make my bread all in one day. Now, you can make this in the evening and then let it cold ferment overnight and bake it in the morning. There's lots of different options for sourdough. It's one of the most flexible ways to make bread, of course. But this is just what I'm going to be doing today because I would like some of this for supper this evening. So you can see it's a wet, sticky dough. It's not super dry. That's what we want. Okay, I'm just going to cover this with a plate, and in a few minutes I'll come back and add in the salt, and we'll start on our stretch and folds. All right, it's been a few minutes. I've got a couple tablespoons or so of salt. I'm just gonna work this in with my hands and do the first little stretch and fold. And then just whenever I think about it, every 15 to 30 minutes, I'll come back and do a stretch and fold or a coil fold, which I will show you. That just really helps to give good structure to the dough, which we don't care about that so much for the focaccia, but it's gonna be fine to use this dough for both. For focaccia, you can mix it up with discard or active starter. You can get it mixed together well and then just let it bulk ferment because you really don't care about the structure. But like I said, you can make them at the same time like this, and that's kind of a fun thing to do as well. And by the way, if you ever accidentally over ferment your dough, just turn it into focaccia or pizza dough or something like that. No need to waste it. I'm just gonna cover this back over with a plate and I'll be back in a few minutes. nice enough outside. It's in the 40s, and I hope you can hear me okay. The snow and stuff is dripping off the roof. It's melting and melting. So anyway, if you hear water dripping, that's why. But it's nice enough that I can do this out here. I usually end up having to do it in the house, but this is a much better way to not have quite so big of a mess. So I've got my bucket of seeds. If you've been following along here for a while, you know that I keep all my seeds in this tote. And we're gonna start with the peppers, and then we'll move on to the tomatoes. And if you're new here, I grow a half-acre market garden. We're in zone 4B in north central Nebraska. And so I'm going to be seeding a lot of tomatoes, well, a lot for me, a lot of tomatoes and peppers today. And so you don't have to have near this many, of course, but it's just going to give you an idea of a couple ways you can do it. We're going to do the peppers in soil blocks. So I really like to do soil blocks. I have a video that I will try to link here that talks about how to make soil blocks and the benefits of doing soil blocks. So I'm going to do my peppers in soil blocks and some of my tomatoes, but these are recycled from my local greenhouse. They're kind of falling apart, but I like them because they're deep and good sized, and I can plant the tomatoes once and then forget about it. Like I don't have to, you know, you can make small soil blocks and then when the plant is established, make bigger ones and like up pot them. It works really well. A lot of people do that. But on my scale, like I don't want to have to be transplanting stuff every other week. I want to plant these and then be done. And I'm only going to plant the early tomatoes today because, you know, 4 to 6 weeks is what it's going to take your tomatoes to grow. But my basement is 72 degrees all the time. And so what happens is my tomatoes and my plants grow really, really fast and they get too big. And one of the biggest mistakes I see people make when starting their own seeds is starting them too early, and then the plants are really big and they don't transplant well out into the garden. So I'm just gonna do some early stuff and I'm gonna wait another week or two to do the rest of it. I like to have early plants. I mean, I want as much early for farmer's market as possible, but if we end up having a cold spring, it's always a gamble, right? Because one year our last frost was the 24th of April. Like I could have planted the 24th of April and been fine, but you don't know that. Typically our last frost is the 15th or 20th of May. And so I'd like to be more like the 10th of April, planting the rest of my tomatoes, because then, you know, 4 to 5 weeks, that'll put them right at about the right height for transplanting out. So anyway, peppers, they take a long time to start. So we're gonna go ahead and do the peppers today. They grow fast in my basement as well. They take longer than tomatoes. So a couple different ways you can do it. You can also get red Solo cups, poke a couple holes in the bottom of them, fill them up partway with soil, plant your tomatoes or peppers or whatever in them, and then as the plant grows, you can add soil. That's another way you can do it. There's lots of different right ways of starting plants. So in this big bucket here, I have my potting mix. I make this myself and I will link the recipe below for you. I also have a video on how to mix it, so I'm not going to show you all of that today. I don't think this is going to be enough. I'll probably have to mix more. Then I'm just going to take my soil blocker, and this one's kind of rusty. It's well used. Make sure you rinse them off when you're done and they won't get so rusty. I have tried to do that always, but there's been a couple times we've forgotten. Anyway, it still works really well. And so I am going to just plunge it down into this soil and get it all filled up. And then I'm going to fill this tray with these soil blocks, and then we'll plant the peppers. And I like to, you know, push it in there by hand, push the soil in by hand. And then I just lay them out, and it makes really nice blocks of soil. actually a little damp. I kind of made it in a hurry last week when I was starting my brassicas. So you can certainly make prettier blocks than this, but that's gonna be okay. Okay, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. So I usually get 10 long and 5 wide, so 50 per flat, and that makes it really easy when you're figuring out, you know, how many you're gonna need to plant for the garden. So I'm doing 100 pepper plants, and usually in my garden plan, I have laid out exactly how many of each kind. I'm just gonna open what I have and see what I've got and just kind of make the decision on the fly today. I have a pretty good idea of what I need. Then for the last couple, I just stamp them out on the table, which is a nice reason to do it outside, and I just take 2 of them and stick them in the little hole at the end. And then these 2, if they keep, we can use them in the next flat. I prefer these really sturdy trays. You notice this last one was kind of breaking on me. It's just a recycled one. These are really sturdy. You can actually drive over them and they won't break. These are from True Leaf Market, and I'll link them down below. They're a very wise investment, but I don't have enough of them. That's why sometimes I use some of the other ones. I need to invest in some more because they last forever, and it's much better than those other kind. You get better at this and you can fill trays pretty quick. They also make soil blockers where you can make like 8 blocks at a time, or even 72 blocks at a time. Like, they have big ones, but for me this one works just fine. And a lot of times my kids even will help do the soil blocking. It's a really fun thing for them to do. Okay, I have poblano, which are just for me, so that's kind of low priority. Jalapeno, Early Sensation, Big Bertha, and the Big Bertha are the red and green sweet peppers, and I think Early Sensation is the yellow. So I'm gonna start with the jalapeno because I don't need very many of those. I am gonna plant a little bit extra because not all of these may come up. Like, they should, because this is brand new seed, but you always want to plant a little bit extra. So okay, here's my tag. It comes with the seed packet, so that's really, really handy. So I'm gonna put the tag in here. Okay, what did I say? 20 red, 20 green, 20 yellow, and 10 poblano. So I think I need to do 20. Let me see how many of these there are. Okay, there's only 15 seeds here of the jalapeno, so that's fine. I'm just gonna make that work. So I'm just gonna put 1 seed in each soil block. Uh-oh, there goes all my seeds. It doesn't take very long to make soil blocks and get your seeds planted, and that is a blessing. Okay, so there's 15 of the peppers, the hot peppers, and I'm gonna record this in my seed time. You've heard me talk about seed time. So it's telling me, to plant my stuff this week, and I'm gonna record that I planted 15 jalapenos just for record keeping, because then I'll know that these 15 are all gonna be jalapeno. And then what I do, sometimes I put a little bit of dry soil over the top, or you can just take just a tiny little bit of this wet soil and cover each seed just a little bit. They'll actually sprout even if you don't cover them, but I usually like to make sure they stay nice and damp by covering them. And I'll show you inside, but we're gonna put them on a heat mat. Peppers like to be on the heat mat. All right, so for the poblano, I'm gonna go ahead and stick them in here next to the jalapenos, because they're also a hot pepper. They're not as hot, but kind of a hot pepper. And they'll have a different look to them, so it'll be easy to tell them apart. So I'm gonna go ahead and do 15 of these because it'll make my flat come out even if I do 20 of something else. We're supposed to get rain tonight, which is gonna make more mud, but we're grateful for it. It is so dry here. We are very anxious for moisture here in Nebraska. I love poblano peppers, and I would grow a lot more of them, but my family doesn't really like the hot stuff. So, okay, 5, 10, 15, 20. And what you can do, if you don't think you're gonna have any, a lot of extra space. Did I get one in there? I don't think I did. What you can do is you can put a couple, if you have some extra seed, in each tray or each cell, at least for a few of them. There's not very many seeds left. So I'd rather get brand new seed next year and make sure that it's really good seed. So I'm just gonna double some of these up, and here's the thing. I can, if I have one that doesn't come up, I can just pull one, carefully split one from here and stick it in another block to make sure that I have a full tray. Because there's nothing worse than like half your seeds coming up and then you only have half what you need and it's too late to start more. So anyway, I'm just gonna cover these over. And if I don't need these, I can just thin them. I can just pull them out and toss the plants away. I know that seems like a waste, but seed's not very expensive. So it's better to have too many plants than not enough. All right, and lastly, we're gonna put the yellow early sensation in here, and then the rest of the peppers will just all be the Big Bertha, which are both the red and the green. They start out green, and if you let them go longer, they turn red. So that's easy, it's just all one kind. All right, so the last 20 here are gonna be Sensation, and I'm probably gonna double these up as well. If I have enough seed. I may not, we'll see what I got here. If for some reason these get mixed up a little bit when I'm planting, it's not a big deal because I can always tell what they are when they produce, right? So it'll be just fine. I need to order some plant tags. I've been meaning to do that. Some ones that I can just write on. So I'll probably try to do that. Because if you just write on, I've tried writing on like popsicle sticks before, and man, well maybe I can use this tag if I have enough. The problem with the popsicle sticks is they don't end up, the writing fades, and then you can't tell what you planted. So it's better to order plant markers, and I'll try to link some of those below. And here's the thing, if I'm ever a little bit short, I can always go to my local greenhouse and get some. I'm certainly not above doing that, but I do like to save as many as I can. It does save on cost, or to start as many as I can, that is. So I'm not doubling any of these up in hopes that they will all produce. They will all come up. And where it's brand new seed, I would almost bet that they will. And I can stick a little row of tomatoes at the end of this flat if I need to, because the tomatoes and peppers will be planted close together. You just want to think about when you combine things in flats, if they're going to be in, like I have 2 gardens, so I don't want to have to take something down and plant it in one garden. I'm just going to double this one up and then haul that flat half full of plants back up to the other garden. I try to plant like things in like places. And for my tomatoes, some of these might not, these are old. My early tomatoes I'm gonna plant in here because I want them nice and big. I'm gonna put them out under some cozy coats to keep them protected from frost. And then I'll probably do my later tomatoes in soil blocks. So I'm actually just gonna take this same potting soil and just fill these trays. And I'm gonna poke a hole kind of deep because I want the tomatoes to start growing down deep. And then you can always add a little bit of soil later on if you want, but you want the roots not to be just right at the top. You don't have to cover these. In fact, I'm gonna stack them up in the dark and stick them in my furnace room where it's nice and warm, and they'll start really nicely in there. And I'm gonna plant my Cherokee purples early. They are my favorite tomato. I get lots of requests for them, and they are usually my first tomato to be ready, believe it or not, even though they're not necessarily an early tomato. For me, they always produce tomatoes the earliest. So I'll just double down on the early thing, and that's what I'm gonna do. Just dropping these down in here. And then I just stack all of these up in my furnace room. It's really hot in here because it's kind of a mess, but we have all of our water heater stuff in here and the heat for our floor. We have in-floor heat in our house. So I'm just gonna put this on top to kind of keep the moisture in, and I'm just gonna watch and make sure they stay moist. Usually having them stacked keeps them moist. You just wanna check them every day and make sure that as soon as they sprout that you get them out of here and put them under lights, because you don't want them to, get real leggy. So I'm just gonna leave these here for a few days and check on them. This top one I might have to add a little moisture to, but the bottom ones will probably be okay. And then we'll put them on the rack under the lights. And I should also mention that this room is dark. So tomatoes like to start in the dark. So I'm just gonna shut the door and it will be in the dark. And then here is these are heat mats, so I have them plugged in. They'll get to be 80 to 90 degrees. I just have a couple of them because I only need them for my peppers, really. And so the peppers are here, and I'm just putting these little domes on top just to kind of keep the humidity in. It helps the seeds to sprout faster. Peppers can take a little while to sprout. And so, yeah, and then here's some of the other stuff that we've started. So here's the cabbage. It's actually time to take these domes off, because you can see that the little green plants are ready for light. And when you grow on these seed starting racks, and I have a whole video on how you can set this up pretty inexpensively, you're gonna want these lights up here, if you can see them. You're gonna want these lights right down, look close to your plants. So I'm gonna be lowering these down. That one's, there we go, See the green starting? These have changed a lot just today. So I'm gonna take the dome off, and then what I do is I place these trays of course have holes, the bottom trays do not. And so then I can just pick these up and dump a little water in, and it sucks the water up into these soil blocks, and that's how I can water them easily indoors. This is broccoli, and this one is cauliflower, and they are just starting right there, just tiny little ones. And as usual, I was busy and I left my sourdough too long, but it's just fine. This has only been on the counter for about 3 hours, so a lot of people want their dough to ferment for hours and hours on the counter, and my house is warm enough at 72 degrees. That would never work. You would have really over fermented dough for sure. The other thing I forgot to tell you is you can use lemon juice instead of the water in this bread for both the focaccia and the cheesecake bread, because then it will give it a little more of a lemony flavor. I've done it both ways several times, and it's good both ways. So if you want extra lemony, you can add lemon to the loaf instead of just the water. So what I'm gonna do is just take half of this and put it back in here and let it ferment a little longer for the focaccia portion. So I'm gonna let it ferment another 3 or 4 hours until I'm ready to get it in the pan, and then we'll cold ferment that overnight and we'll bake it in the morning for breakfast. So I'll set that off to the side, and then this is where we're gonna add the cream cheese and the blueberries before we put this in the fridge for a couple of hours to chill. So I'm just laminating it by spreading it out as thinly as possible. Okay, and what I have here is homemade cream cheese. Now you can use real cream cheese if you'd like. This is just vanilla yogurt that I strained extra long until it was really thick. And I have a video on how to make your own yogurt on this channel if you search for that. But I'm just gonna get, I don't know, maybe a little, about 8 ounces worth of cream cheese put in here, and I'm gonna add a half a cup of sugar. We're just making like a lemon cheesecake filling, if you will. And then about 4 tablespoons or a quarter cup of lemon juice. You can add more or less if you want. It's not gonna hurt anything. I do like a nice sweet lemon cheesecake filling, and we're just gonna mix it up well. You can also put lemon zest in here if you want. I don't have fresh lemons today, so, you know, in the interest of trying not to go to the grocery store all the time, I typically keep bottled lemon juice on hand just so that I can make things like this when I want to. We're just gonna spread this on. So delicious. This is my kids, one of my kids' favorite breads. I'm gonna spread it all out nicely. And then you can use fresh or frozen blueberries, but fresh is preferred for this because the frozen has a lot of extra moisture in it that isn't necessarily what you're gonna want. So you're just gonna put some blueberries all over your dough. And then we're just gonna roll it up. And the reason you wanna roll it is because you want the cheesecake to be evenly distributed throughout the dough. This is kind of a sticky dough, but I did that on purpose because it's gonna make a really beautiful loaf of bread. The stickier your sourdough within reason, the wetter the dough, the more beautiful your crumb will be. So I'm just rolling it up so that it's a nice even swirl. And then I'm just gonna fold it over, and I'm gonna be really gentle because these blueberries are gonna wanna come through the top. So I'm just putting a little bit of tension on the dough, but I'm gonna be really super careful with it. And if it pokes out a little bit, it's all right. It is kind of a messier process, but it's really worth the effort in the end. And I'm gonna just take a tea towel, stick it in a bowl. These are like 7-inch bowls. You can also use bannetons if you want. And I'm just gonna really carefully tuck this under, and may even use this because it's kind of wet. Flip it over and stick it right in that bowl. And I'm gonna just cover this like this and stick it in the fridge for a couple of hours, and then we're gonna bake it, and it's gonna be absolutely delicious. So after a couple of hours in the refrigerator, I am just dumping the dough out on a piece of parchment paper. And I actually do not brush this with any extra flour, and you'll see why after we get done baking it. I'm just doing a very simple score. It's, you know, it's kind of a wet, sticky dough, and so that works out just fine. I baked it at 425 degrees covered for 25 minutes and then uncovered for 15 minutes, just like I do my regular sourdough. And I'm just gonna let it cool a bit before slicing, of course. Mine always puffs up really big and almost fills the pan. And now for the reason why we're not gonna add any flour to the top, and that's because we're gonna do a little bit of a honey lemon wash on the top of this bread. So I'm just putting about a quarter cup lemon juice and a quarter cup of warm honey in a bowl. mixing it up, and we're just going to brush that on, and it just adds a really nice glaze to this bread. Really solidifies the honey and the lemon flavor. And if there's a lot of flour on the top, it just doesn't brush on as well. So I just don't find the need to add any extra flour. It's not like the scoring shows up super beautiful just because of all the blueberry juice anyway. Then moving on to finishing the focaccia. So before bed, I'm just putting some blueberries, sugar, a little bit of vanilla and lemon juice, and heating it up on the stove, just making a blueberry sauce that's going to make the focaccia absolutely delicious. And you could use fresh or frozen blueberries for this. And I just made a little bit of slurry out of some cornstarch and water just to thicken this up a bit. And all the exact measurements for all of these recipes are on the blog wagonwheelhomestead.com. So you'll find lots of sourdough tips and tricks there, as well as all of these recipes and a lot more. And I like to bake my focaccia in my 12-inch cast iron pans. So what I did is I just melted a little bit of butter in the bottom of the pan, and then I spread my wet sticky dough out into the pan. And again, it's okay if it's over fermented, that works fine for focaccia. I put about half of the blueberry sauce in the middle, and I'm just folding it over. We want blueberries to be all the way through this focaccia. And just gently spreading it out as best you can. And then I'm going to put this in the refrigerator overnight and let it cold ferment. You could let it rise on the counter for a couple more hours and then bake it if you wish. But because it's late in the evening, I'm going to just put this in the refrigerator and we will bake it in the morning. So in the morning, I did let it rise for a couple of hours out of the fridge just because it was still pretty flat from being in the fridge. So you just want it to be nice and puffy. Then I'm mixing up a 1/4 cup of butter and a 1/2 cup of flour and sugar. I'm going to make like a crumble topping to go on top of this, and this is part of what makes it one of my family's favorite sourdough dishes. Just putting on the rest of the blueberry sauce. I'm just going to spread it around with my hands and then dimple it down into the dough. That's traditionally what you do with focaccia. You really want to get the filling all incorporated and dimpled down into the dough. And to me, this is the most fun part of making focaccia. Then I'm just going to sprinkle it with the crumble. And we're going to bake this at 425 degrees for 20 to 25 minutes. You'll see it golden brown on top. You want to make sure that the bread is done in the middle. You can check the temperature if you wish. It should be about 200 degrees in the middle, but I find that 20 to 25 minutes is fine. I don't usually check the temperature. As long as it's golden brown, that's all that matters. And then I'm just mixing up about 1 cup of powdered sugar with a little bit of lemon juice to make a glaze. And this really finishes off the lemony part of this focaccia that is so delicious. So just giving it a nice glaze, and you can either eat it right away when it's hot. I usually like to let it cool off just a little bit, and it's absolutely delicious. Well, thank you guys for joining me while we made lemon blueberry sourdough bread and this lemon blueberry sourdough focaccia, which is so good. It's my kids' favorite. They're anxious to dive in. So anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this. If you want to learn more about how to bake with sourdough, how to grow your own food, live independently from the grocery store, definitely hit that like and subscribe button, and I will see you in the next video.